Hello, welcome to Movies I Love with yours truly, Nomfanelo Malloy. So, the film that I will be discussing is Sicario in honor of its 10-year anniversary. So, congratulations to that. So, the film is a 2015 crime thriller film. I see some sites include action. Yes, there is action, but I wouldn't say it's heavily action. But anyways, regardless, it's a crime thriller film. It is directed by Denis Villeneuve, who has directed films such as Arrival and Dune Part One and Part Two so far. And the film stars Emily Blunt, Benicio del Toro, and Josh Brolin. All right, so rewatching this movie now, it's just interesting to see that with the genre itself, in terms of of crime thriller movies involving law enforcement, it feels like the genre itself has been quite forgotten in regards to films themselves. We see them mostly in TV shows these days, but it's just appreciated to see movies in this genre. For quite some time, many decades ago, there used to be a lot of movies involving law enforcement as protagonists, such as The Fugitive, those movies with Tommy Lee Jones, and I'm sure there's like countless of others. But it seems like these days we see them mostly on TV. But it was just nice to see that while I was rewatching it. Um, Also, too, I feel like this movie is quite underrated amongst Denis Villeneuve's filmography. I'm sure most people, when they think of Denis Villeneuve, they think of films such as Dune Part 1, Part 2, Arrival, the Blade Runner sequel, like those types of movies. But if you've seen like his earlier work, he did mostly like the smaller scale type movies, like the very like character driven, but I would say low budget, mid budget range with the movies. And it was just nice to revisit those stuff that he used to do. Maybe he'll come back to it at some point. But regardless, Denis Villeneuve is a talented filmmaker. And I'm really excited for him to direct the upcoming James Bond movie. Looking forward to see his take on that. The cast is quite stacked in this movie. Everyone did a great job with their performances. So we have Emily Blunt as our protagonist, Kate Mercer. Apparently, originally, with her character was male, but then the screenwriter Taylor Sheridan, who has gone on to do a lot, as people describe the Sheridan verse for Paramount Plus with the shows like Yellowstone, Landman, all that stuff. But apparently, he decided to change it to a female, to show, I guess, the character standing on principle, especially since the other characters, I would say outside of Daniel Kaluuya, essentially are quite shifty when it comes to standing under principles, essentially. But but yeah, I find Emily Blunt, she holds her own in this movie. I think this is the first movie I've seen of her playing a lead role, because prior to this movie, I've seen her in supporting roles, most notably The Devil Wears Prada, which, speaking of which, I looking forward to the sequel that's coming out in 2026, and I might do a Movies I Love video on the first movie, so stay tuned for that one. But but yeah, her character is quite fish out of water. So at the beginning of the movie, she's leading the raid to the house that they're heading towards, and she's quite a bit shaken up, especially like when there was a discovery of like the dead bodies hidden amongst the walls, and then there was the explosion that happened afterwards, and like despite all that stuff, like Elise, with the character, her character is willing to stand by her principles by essentially revealing the truth. When one of the officers asks what to say to the, I believe it was a district attorney or something like that. And throughout this movie, as she joins Benicio del Toro and Josh Brolin's characters, her principles are questioned essentially because she wants to do things by the book, even though her character is a rookie. But unfortunately, like those stuff for her is challenged along the way, especially like when we get towards the end of the movie. I felt bad for her character, and especially like how it ends, where essentially she's forced to sign that paper that said that we did things by the book, even though clearly that didn't happen. Just makes me wonder what happens to her character, because it's kind of left up in the air. Like, yes, she's still alive and all that stuff, but it makes you wonder: does she still stay in law enforcement, or does she leave towards the end? So I think that's up for the audience to decide. I don't know. I bet, like in her position, she would probably leave, is my guess. But who knows? So also too, we have Benicio del Toro as Alejandro. He's essentially plays the silent type of his character. Because essentially, we don't really know much about his character as he's introduced. He doesn't really like to say a lot. He'll often nod, and whenever Kate tries to ask him like a question regarding his identity, he's a bit, I would say, wishy-washy, at least at the beginning, and all that stuff. So interesting. So I found a clip. Benicio del Toro, he did this interview on the Happy, Sad, Confused podcast, and he talked briefly about the film Sicario.
I heard you talking to Roger Deakins and the great cinematographer, and he said something that was really striking that didn't necessarily surprise me, that you're the only actor he's ever seen ask for less lines. And that was in Sicario, and maybe it's been in other works. Is that just intuitive that, like, this guy is going to function better as a contrast to these other characters, that he's a coiled spring, that when he does speak, it's going to have more impact? Give me a sense of, like, the idea behind scaling back
Well,
on.
the idea behind the idea behind it was like the character was explaining what happened to him in Sicario, why he had become a Sicario.
Yeah.
And my suggestion was, like, in my experience in life, and I've met some men that have been in situations similar to that, or been in traumatic situations, they don't talk about them.
Right.
They don't, and especially not to strangers. I mean,
Right.
it takes
Talk to a
ye-
war veteran, they're not going to tell you
it
what
takes
happened.
years
Yeah.
before they talk. So that was the approach. The approach was like, I don't know if I see a guy like this opening up to Emily Blunt's character.
Yeah.
So it was and Denis understood that right away, and he kind of said, I get it. And he then had Josh's character explain it to Emily, which makes more sense.
Right.
But thinking about that movie and the Wes Anderson movie is night and day,
Exactly.
because with Wes, you have to, you
Having his character essentially be quite minimalistic works, because as he's mentioned in this clip, it doesn't make sense for someone in his position to overtly share. And it's interesting that his character apparently used to be in law enforcement. Then after what happened to his wife and daughter, he became a Sicario. So that was quite the interesting shift there with his character. But just how the film approaches that, in this movie, I would say works and is effective. So, also too, we have Josh Brolin as Matt. So, while with Alejandro doesn't do a lot of talking, we have Matt. He's the opposite of that, and in ways, though, with both Matt and Alejandro, they're quite the pair and all that stuff. In ways, they could do their own like buddy cop movie. I mean, that kind of happened in the sequel, which I'll get into later. But with Matt, though, his character is quite shifty because when we first see him in that conference room, he's like wearing, was it like this one of those open shirts, and he's wearing flip flops, and you wonder why someone in law enforcement in his position is wearing flip flops. That's that's hilarious. Interesting that um, with Josh Brolin's character and with Benicio del Toro's character, they're willing to essentially break the law to achieve their objectives, essentially. Because with with Matt, he's I guess he's willing to go there to help Alejandro to essentially achieve his goal, which is to go after the people responsible for his family's death. And and it's interesting that I guess like with the justice system in Mexico, at least in this movie, is quite flimsy. Because we see that when they are traveling in the car, like we see corrupt police officers, where there was one cop that tried to kill Kate while she was in the car. So it seems in a way like it's quite lawless, but yeah, it's quite interesting to see all that stuff. The main themes of the movie shows that like it deals with morality. It's really about like, do you do is it all about doing the right thing in terms of following by the rules and all that stuff, or is it about doing what's necessary by breaking the rules, essentially, like going to the extremes, essentially. And I love how with this movie it debates that essentially. And with Kate, she wants to do everything by the book, essentially. Also, too, with her partner Reggie, like they both want to go by the book, essentially. While with Matt and Alejandro, they're willing to the opposite. Like they're going through extreme lengths to get what they want. Probably because with law enforcement, it's not always on their side, so they're willing to just do things on their own, and they're willing to, abide by paperwork, all that stuff, just to get what they want. So that's interesting stuff. Um, Also, too, in Mexico, at least in this movie, it's quite gruesome, especially when we get to the bodies, because when at the beginning, when Kate and Reggie are doing the raid in the U.S., the dead bodies were covered up in plastic, while in Mexico, they're when Kate sees for the first time, the bodies are hanging, they're out in the open, they're naked, and wow, that's quite gruesome. But in ways, it shows that with stuff like that in Mexico, I guess is part of the territory. Because when we get to the ending of the movie, when we see Silvio's kid playing soccer, there's like gunshots happening in the background where everyone turns like to hear like what's happening, and then they just not long afterwards they go back to doing the game. Yeah, that's interesting with that stuff. And this movie, it you could say, brings up conversations on not just law and order, but also too with the drug trade and cartels and all that stuff. I'm not going to get into the weeds and all that stuff. But it seems like these stuff is still quite timely, even though it's been going on for a long time. And it seems like it's still happening to this day. Also too, yeah, the rest of the cast I forgot to mention. So we have Daniel Kaluuya as Reggie. I thought he was great. In this movie. Funny that with Josh Brolin's character, did not want Reggie at all to be part of this investigation because clearly Reggie's going to ask a lot of questions because apparently Reggie has a background being a lawyer. And then Kate decides to bring him along, essentially, even though Matt did not like that. So I found, yeah, that was interesting dynamics to see. We have also too John Bernthal in this movie as Ted. Now John Bernthal he's always charming to watch whenever he's on screen, and this role I would say is no exception. Him and Emily Blunt, I would say they have great chemistry as their characters get friendly at the bar, which leads to the hotel room. It's just unfortunate that his character turns out to be a corrupt cop, essentially. So there is that, and which leads to Ted getting beat to a pulp, essentially, when he's in the car being targeted by Alejandro and Matt. So yeah, other than that, I would say John Bernthal is always pleasant to see on screen. Also, too, we have Jeffrey Donovan as Steve. He was great with his bit there when he's in the car with the rest of the group. And then Victor Garber as Kate and Reggie's boss at the FBI. He was great as well too in this movie. So yeah, pretty stacked cast there. Um, Also, too, cinematography by Roger Deakins, of course, is excellent. Of course, I would say one of my favorite shots is always involving the tunnel sequence towards the end. I thought the use of the night vision stuff there was quite exquisite. If you're not aware, he has his podcast called the Team Deakins Podcast, where he not only interviews filmmakers and different cast and crew members, but also too he would do a deep dive into the films that he's been involved in. And I believe there was an episode that came out a few years ago, Turning the Tables episodes, where they talked about Sicario, where he, I guess, is being questioned on that movie. I recommend you guys check out that episode. I believe also two other cast members and crew members involved with that movie were interviewed in this podcast. So check it out if you have not done so already. Also, too, the score by the late Johan Johansson is excellent. I recommend you guys listen to that score if you haven't done so already. But interesting that in interviews with Denis Villeneuve, I guess he was looking for a score that was quite reminiscent of Jaws. And listening to this score in the movie, I would say, yeah, like you could tell though, because with the motifs that are used throughout this movie, man, like it really gets you with that. Because I think I did a limited like podcast where I talked about my top 40 um, scores. I think with like scores and soundtracks. I can't remember. And I did mention this movie, so check it out if you have not done so on the channel. But yeah, it's quite the score with this one. Yeah, I just really love this movie. Like I think what's effective is yeah the use of subtext. It really goes with the whole less is more approach, especially with the characters not revealing their true motives, essentially, which is quite effective. And also to love how it questions like ethics and morality and all that stuff. So there is that. In terms of critiques, I think I just had one involving the cop Silvio. We don't really see much of Silvio. They just show him at home with his family before he heads off to work, and then like towards the end, we see Silvio with a cartel member before he's interrupted by Alejandro, and it kind of makes you question like why are we seeing Silvio really if we're not going to spend too much time getting to know his character. Like I just wondered why. But then after rewatching this movie, and then I watched like a featurette of this movie where the writer was like explaining that stuff. I'm like, oh, I kind of get this. I guess with Sylvia, it kind of makes the audience question like why he's doing what he's doing essentially. Is it because he needs to survive essentially, especially since stuff happens whether you're a local or part of law enforcement essentially, as the audience leaves you question that stuff. So I found that was interesting, and it just made me learn to appreciate, I would say, that aspect of the movie. All right, let's get into the sequel, Sicario, Day of the Soldado. So what before like the movie came out at the time, I kind of questioned like why is there a sequel, and is it necessary? But then at the same time, I decided to be open about this. And so Denis Villeneuve was not involved with this film. It was a different director. And but we had Benicio del Toro, Josh Brolin, they were back. I think also too Jeffrey Donovan was back. But with this film was very like action heavy. And I did see this film in theaters at the time. I saw it on Canada Day with my brother, which is interesting itself. But I would say this sequel is quite the disappointment. I think mainly because of the approach it decides to go with, probably because it has a different creative team. But yeah, it just makes you question like what's the point of the sequel? The first one was good on its own. It did not fully need to explore. Plus, also too, like it makes you like question because like there's been a lot of films and shows that deal with like the Mexican drug trade and all that stuff. Like how different is this movie and compares like to those stuff? So yeah, it was like quite disappointing, I would say, with this sequel. Apparently, I think since the second one came out, there's been talks of a third one. Now, it has not been officially confirmed or greenlit. So at this point, it's I would say it's just rumors. So I saw on Wikipedia that the sequel is going to be titled Sicario Capos, and Christopher McQuarrie, who did the Mission Impossible movies, is possibly involved with this. So again, like we don't know for sure like how real this is. But apparently I saw what Josh Brolin, he did interview on Happy Sad Confused podcast while he was promoting Weapons. So he had this to share during that interview. So I'll play that clip.
I spoke to Benicio. He seemed to have some hope for another Sicario with you, Emily. I don't know if Denis would be involved or not. Like,
I mentioned at some point, I don't know, maybe just to be contrary, I was like, yeah, that's never going to happen. And then the producers showed up and Molly and that's not true, which is fine. And then I just heard recently that it's very, very real.
okay.
So cool.
You think with Denis? Do we know that?
Don't know that.
Okay.
I honestly don't know that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Running Man, we're going
I don't know at this point how I feel about a third movie. If they're able to come up with a great story, great, I'll be open to it. I don't know if they'll be able to get everyone on board for this, but Yeah, I don't know. I have mixed feelings about a third sequel at this point. Maybe if you're really keen on doing another movie, why not just do it as an anthology where you could have similar themes as like the first movie, but maybe set it at a different country that's not Mexico, because we've seen too many films and shows that deal with this subject matter. So it'll be interesting to see, I don't know, how this is approached, let's say if it was in a different country, let's say that's rarely shown in film before. Or maybe idea like just to do this as a TV series. It doesn't have to be with the same characters, but maybe like, I don't know, set it within the same world as Sicario, but I don't know, but have the time, I guess, to explore this. It could be shown from different points of view. But yeah, I don't know how to feel about the idea of a third movie, especially since the second one didn't do well at the box office at the time. So again, we'll see what happens here. But I think anything is possible these days. So that's pretty much it what I had to say for Sicario. So let me know in the comment section, do you love this movie? Like, what are your favorite aspects of the movie? Any favorite scenes or moments? What about your least favorite stuff about this movie? Let me know in the comments section. So if you want to support me, you can visit buymeacoffee.com/Malloy, where you can donate and also to look at exclusive posts there. Also, too, I have a community tab on YouTube. So if you're a subscriber, feel free to comment there as long as it's under community guidelines. And if you want to follow me on social media, my links are in the description. So I want to say thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope to catch you on the next one.